And welcome to the LCRR podcast. Once again, Joey Zanaboni here from my parents' office area, my mom's office in St. Louis, Missouri, and joined today on our LCRR podcast, episode 3, season 1, by the one and only Mike Rooney. Mike, how you doing today?
Joey, pleasure, man. I'm good. Nice to chat with you.
Yeah, well, it's an absolute pleasure to chat with you as well. Now, you are out in the fine state of Arizona here?
Arizona, Prescott, Arizona, spelled Prescott, pronounced Prescott. Where else you get run out of here? So we're in northern Arizona, up in the mountains of Arizona.
And everything's good with the COVID deal? Everything is going swimmingly here for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say as far as you know, obviously my brother lives in Hoboken. Like, that's a nightmare where those guys are. So, yeah, it hasn't been too terribly bad out here, quite honestly.
Well, we got some news baseball-wise on the Major League side today. Possibly getting restarted. Now, I know you're in the college side, but just got to hit this first. What do you think about this plan? The owners have approved it. It's going to the Players Union. Any idea? Maybe put a handicap on this for us. What do you think will happen?
You know, I would say every time I get excited, I get, dejected. I saw Sean Doolittle had like 9 or 10 tweets today that were very safety oriented. And I don't know. Yeah, it's like there's so many layers to it. There's the finances and the safety and the, like not just the players. I mean,
right.
And it's hard to not have an emotional reaction like I am, like everybody, right? Like my day job, I'm in my home office. I have a TV right here. And if there was Major League Baseball, I would turn this TV on and it would never not have baseball on it. And I'm watching the KBO games, we're starving for it. I think it'd be so great for the psyche of the country. But, of course, there's so many factors and it's hard to know, I'm Sean Doolittle's a very bright guy, but he's not an epidemiologist, right?
Right.
So
few of us are there, Mike.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm just reading his opinion on the research. So I don't know, man. I'm desperate for it. But of course, we all want everybody to be safe for sure.
Well, what have you been doing to kind of keep your psyche buoyed during this? I've had, the ups and downs, and I've been kind of down in that trough and depressed. I've been trying to exercise more. What have you been doing to just kind of avoid falling down through the pits of despair?
Yeah, that's right. I would say the exercise part for sure. I would say for my baseball fix, I've watched every college baseball highlight on YouTube that I can get my hands on. And thankfully, I've got it on TV right now. ESPN's running replays of games. Thankfully, the Sirius XM show I do with Darren Sutton on college baseball that's sponsored by Perfect Game. We're still doing that every week, which has been a blast. And I'm still writing every week for Perfect Game. I've been writing an article on 2 teams that I wish I had gotten to meet and see this year. So that's been fun. But it's I'm watching your Twitter reel once a week. That's my diagnosis for everyone. That's good for the soul, right there. A citrus-based '90s beverage. Who doesn't need that in their life?
I know. Oh, I love that one. I still go back and watch it about once a week myself. At the time it kind of went viral, I was watching it, 5 times a day. But
how many views on that thing? Do you know?
300,000. Well, I don't have it exactly. 331,000, 332,000. Yeah. There's one that's got about 295 or something like that 1,000. I'm hoping, sometimes I'll put it back. I'm like, hey, let's see if this get to 300,000. But
awesome.
Okay. Hey, now that we've gotten the other stuff out of the way, let's get right down to my work here, Mike. What is it that hooked you about that? Because you've been one of the you've been one of these straws that have really sort of stirred the drink and said, boy, what is this right here? What is it that hooked you in about that?
Yeah, it just made me laugh. It was joyous. I think that's one of the fun things about college baseball is that, and I know that your talents will take you beyond college baseball if they haven't already, but I know they have, but I don't know, college baseball to me is fun because it's that perfect age, the kids are old enough to be really good players, but it's super joyous. It's like the relationships with their teammates and it's not super monetized yet. So, and when I hear you announce, it's very kind of like that, no holds barred, just very joyous. And it's hilarious. It makes me laugh.
Yeah, it is pure. And I've always had this sort of, I don't want to offend our sponsors. We have many of them on this podcast. The LCRR podcast, brought to you by AutoZone, now delivering food from stale pretzels to off-brand colas. And let me tell you, they got the best goddamn imitation Slurpee you're ever going to find at a car part store. But
Thank you.
I've always been a little bit hesitant. It's just for the pure joy of it. And I was a graduate assistant there at West Florida, and just kind of, just doing it. Now there wasn't really a lot of money involved or anything like that. I was just doing it for the pure joy. And actually this morning, one of the kids from that video who had a bunch of the strikeouts in the video actually messaged me, and just we caught up. And it puts that little sort of,
Right.
kick in your heart, and you just say, oh, this is for the pure love of it. Do you think that, this coronavirus deal, crystal ball question here, but do you think it's going to make people more cynical?
More cynical. Like when you say cynical, you mean like cynical, like more worrisome, more like how do you mean cynical?
Well, yeah, worrisome, pessimistic, just feeling like the rug can always sort of get yanked out from under us.
Yeah, I would say it's a good question. I mean, it does feel like this is our generation's kind of like World War II, like those types of, JFK assassination moment where you'll never forget it. I don't know. I mean, I like every part of me believes that these are the moments that bring out the best in the American fiber. I do believe that. It's a little, I guess that's a little romantic, but at the same time, I believe it. Like it's an amazing country with an amazing history. But I think this one is so spooky, and I'm sure all the other ones felt spooky at the time, but this one's so spooky because it's so opaque, right? It's like so you can't identify it, you can't see it, it's an invisible enemy. We don't really know it. You feel like if you hear 10 people speak about it, less after the 10 dissertations than you did before. So, but I do believe at the end of this, there will be something positive that will come out of it. Probably many positive things, but I think it'd be unwise to underestimate that there has been and there will continue to be hardship around it for sure.
Yeah, and to talk about baseball, I mean, that's just such a small part of our society, but you're so right, is that if they could find a way to get the games going again, it really would buoy people's spirits. You said you've been watching the KBO to that end. Thoughts and reactions. What do you think about the level of play over there in that particular league?
Yeah, I mean, I love the level of play is interesting. The American players really stand out, which is interesting. And, like pridefully, it makes you feel good. Like, wow, our big league players really are, they're as elite as I always thought they were. But I would say I love how unencumbered those players are. Like who doesn't love the bat flips? When the hitters swing and miss, they're very animated. They play it's interesting. They play with a lot of flair over there, but I'll tell you which is so ironic, right? Because American pitchers would say, hey, that's disrespectful. Or you could argue that the Korean players are way more respectful than what you're used to. And my thing about celebrations in baseball is I'm 100% in favor of them. It's just about where they're directed. Like, I think when you eyeball your opponent during a celebration, I find that to be really inappropriate and out of bounds. But as long as your celebration is not directed at the person that was on the wrong side of it, count me in. And you notice those Korean players, when they bat flip, they don't glance anywhere near that pitcher. It has nothing to do with the pitcher. It's just a pure individual celebration. So I would like to see more of that in our game.
And it's fascinating because there's not really any fans watching right now, but overall, cutout fans. The paper fans are there, but overall, it seems like in many ways the Asian game is more fun. You have cheerleaders on top of the dugouts. I remember reading an article in the New York Times a few years ago about a baseball game, the CPBL, and one of the fans described it with a phrase that translated to hot and noisy. And there wasn't really sort of people going out there just to hear the crack of the bat. We hear it now because nobody's there, but it seems like there's something maybe a little more fun. I'll go ahead and say this. I've said it many times before, not that anybody was probably listening, but I believe, even though I can't understand most of what's being said, I think that in Japan, Korea, Taiwan. I think that's where the best baseball announcing is being done right now in the world. I think it's very exciting. I'm sure it's very informative as well. What do you think about announcers from that side of the world?
I've never locked in on it. It's funny. I would love to. I've studied Spanish my whole life, but I've never really locked in on it. And every once in a while, I'll put the ESPN Deportes on when the Caribbean World Series is on, and just to try and hear those announcers. And so I would say more from a Caribbean standpoint. I've never really. I mean, the Asian languages are so far beyond me; it's hard to say. But I would say this, Joey, that I mean, and I'm not ripping on the American version of baseball. Clearly, I'm fully, addicted to it. I love it.
You're it, baby.
I'm in. But you could argue we've got the least fun version of baseball, right? Like in the Dominican and in the Asian countries. I mean, it's a big party. It reminds me of European soccer, and we probably could use a little bit of that.
Well, a little bit about my backstory. In 2018, I was working for an independent team in the Dallas area, the Texas Air Hogs, and we partnered with a Chinese steel conglomerate. And about 2/3 of our roster were members of the Chinese national baseball team, hoping to get ready for the World Baseball Classic, which, unfortunately today, another victim of the crisis is being delayed. But we played. And I didn't know anything about these were players from mainland China. I didn't know anything about baseball in China. I did a little research, and one of the things I came across was from the CPBL, the Manny Ramirez home run, and he just kind of gets it over the wall. It's about 2013, and the announcer says, "That one's gone like the ex-girlfriend who will never ever return," and it's hilarious. He does it in English.
Wow.
He seems to be doing it in his own language, and then kind of breaks into English as Manny's rounded the bases. And I laughed. And for me, that kind of, it kind of broke some in my brain. I had been announcing professionally for about 3 or 4 years, and I'd always kind of played it conservative. I was like, I don't want to be too. And after I heard that, it wasn't very long until I was saying, Sean Stutzman sitting him down quicker than extra strength laxatives, and that kind of gave way. Yeah, I like that one. The other team didn't like that one. We had some parents right. What did he just say? But
oh no,
it just he had this feeling. This guy knew, I don't know what his name is, but he knew. Okay, it's Manny Ramirez. He hits a home run. It's going to go viral in America. So this is my chance to say something that might, really go off. And so I kind of thought of myself as sort of like the reverse of that guy. I'm doing it in English. Maybe people are watching in China, maybe not. But that kind of spurred me to think more along those lines. And when they did that series last year with Seattle and Ichiro's last hurrah over there, I was just taken by it. I felt like there was something very exciting about it, but there was still an elegance to it. And I agree with you. There's something in America. We do have this kind of traditional and what did they used to call Brian McCann? Fun police, that was, we kind of had. What would be something you would change? You probably work in the most fun version of high level baseball, which is college. But what would you change about the game as a whole if you could?
Yeah. So you mean just baseball in general, right?
Well, and I'm not saying, make everybody DH everywhere or anything like that. I'm saying maybe about the culture or something like that. What would you change?
Yeah, I just think I think as far as the there obviously it's the question is broad, right? I mean, like there's so many places you could go with this, but I think from the culture of celebrations and those types of things, I just think I think Korea is a great example, right? When I see a hitter, drill a ball in the gap and bat flip, there's no disrespect to the pitcher at all. They don't even address the pitcher. They flip their bat diagonally away from the pitcher. They never eyeball the pitcher. And I think in America we couldn't do that because if the hitter didn't eyeball the pitcher would immediately start eyeballing the hitter. And so I just think I would like to see both groups have freedom to just what I'm 100% against is when I look you right in the eyeballs and I show you up. That's a no-go for me. But like if you throw a great changeup and punch me out, why shouldn't you should be able to celebrate that? just the way I should be able to celebrate the home run. And so and again, what happens in America is the pitcher gives up the home run and he's looking at the hitter most often saying, almost like daring him to look at you. So it's kind of like it takes two to tango and both parties are guilty. So I think it's not that hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
if they're doing it in the KBO, like they have like no problems with it, it appears. And so I don't see why we couldn't adopt some of those things.
Well, and I hope that this is a little cultural diffusion here. We'll take maybe some elements of what's making that game more popular and incorporate them into the game in America. This is the LCRR podcast brought to you by the Hare Krishna movement, at least in part. Hare Krishna now with 10% more zest. We've got...
Yes, well done.
Who is writing this? Marty?
Yeah, right. That's Marty.
Great. Marty? Still over there? Well, Mike, tell us a little bit about how you got your start on the broadcast side. We've got sort of the origin story here of Mike Rooney. Do you remember the first game he called?
I do. Yeah. So the long story short is I was coaching, right? My dream was to be a Division I head coach, and I grew up in suburban Philadelphia, this kind of born and raised on sports radio. And our coach at the time, Pat Murphy, who's now the bench coach for the Brewers, one of my years at ASU, he had a radio show on Monday nights, and our play-by-play guy, Tim Healy, who's the best, he has to do football and basketball and baseball. So by the time the spring got there, he was gassed. And so Murph just said, hey, like, Heels, we need to give Heels some oxygen here because he's still doing our 50 games and hopefully deep into the postseason. So you're going to host the radio show this year. And I was kind of like, so like, am I getting fired as the coach? Or like, coaches don't.
You've been reassigned.
Host. Yeah, right. So anyway, he had me do it and it was super fun. And then it was completely unprofessional, but it was awesome. And then a couple years later, I left Arizona State and I was a junior college coach, and Murph called Fox Sports Arizona and said, hey, like, I know we have a game on TV this year and Mike Rooney's going to be the color analyst. And Fox Sports Arizona politely said to Coach Murphy, like, hey, Coach, I'm not sure if you know how this works, but like, we actually hired the analyst, not the coach of the team in the game. And Murph is a very persuasive guy. He kind of said, that's great. So Mike's going to do it. What time do you need him there? And they're like, oh, so anyway, he just wore him down. So as soon as I did that, it was, I believe it was Arizona versus Arizona State in the midweek game. That was 2006. And then I had a tape to start, kind of mail stalking ESPN. I just started sending it to them and I would get to do more games. And my first game for ESPN was 2009. It was Bethune-Cookman versus Delaware State.
Hey,
and so,
Delaware State.
The Hornets, if you will.
The Hornets. Oh, okay.
Yes.
For some reason, I was thinking something like the aluminum ciders, the Delaware State aluminum ciders.
They could be that. Should have been.
I don't know a lot about Delaware though, but that's kind of close. Yeah. Now, was it in Delaware? You're from Philadelphia. That's right there, right?
Well, the game was actually in Daytona Beach, which is where Bethune-Cookman is. But I think it was honestly just because I had been staying in contact with them for a long time, sending them tapes, and I'm assuming the A crew didn't raise their hand and say, yes, please let us have the Delaware State Bethune-Cookman game.
Yeah.
So, but hey, it only takes one.
How did you kind of keep yourself going, keep your motor going when they were not responding? That's something that I am, trying to keep gassed up here as we kind of take this break with the coronavirus. How did you keep yourself motivated and eventually kind of penetrate the indifference?
Yeah, I think it's tricky, right? It's like that's in all versions of sales. Like my day job is medical sales. It's the same way. How do you balance persistence with not being so bothersome that they just decide no? One thing that I learned when I was reaching out to ESPN is I just felt like, I was so frustrated in the beginning because I felt like I had something to offer, and I was just thinking, how can you not see what I have to offer?
Right.
And then, but they just don't, like they're busy, they're doing their own thing. So what I discovered was the best way for me to stay in touch with them was to provide value that they couldn't get elsewhere. So what I started, I'm a college baseball nerd. Oh, like it's what I care about, college baseball. It's my favorite thing in the world outside of my family. And so I just started I would send them very short emails periodically saying, hey, here's what I'm excited about in college baseball. So I was helping them like get a snapshot of what's going on in our sport. And I wasn't taking up a lot of their time. And so I just slowly dripping on them that way. And, the other thing clearly is I was always trying to meet people that I could get connected to them. So they were doing college baseball in Omaha. So who could I meet that could say, hey, Mike Rooney's not an axe murderer, actually. You know,
he
so
uses a gun. Don't worry.
those were two things. But I tell you, like for me, getting to broadcast on ESPN has been a life-changing dream come true for me. But I mean, I started, you saw the timeline, right? I started sending them my tapes in 2006 and I got to do my first game in 2009. That's a long time to stay with that. But obviously I'm clearly overjoyed that I did.
And who really kind of at ESPN do you think influenced you the most? Who maybe did you latch onto as a mentor and kind of learn the ropes of that particular world, the worldwide leader?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, this is indirect to your question, but Meg Renchis, who is the CP, the coordinating producer for softball, she was the person to give me my first shot. So, I mean, I will always be indebted to Meg for giving me that Delaware State Bethune-Cookman game. But honestly, I've just, over the course of those 11 years, I've leaned really heavily on the play-by-play guys I've had and the producers I've had because, I mean, I knew nothing about television. I didn't know any of the terms. I didn't know what it was, like a foreign language. So leaning on those guys, building relationships with those guys. I've had so many great play-by-play guys, so many great producers and directors. And so, just over the course of time, you ask them a question and, I used to always send them an email like, hey, if there's anything that you think I could do better, and if you think there's things that I did that really stood out as good, I'd like to know that too, because I don't know the answers to either of those things. I'm just doing what I think is best. But I'd love to know what is best. So I would say it's been very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of in that boat of trying to learn, and it's amazing how you sort of take things for granted, or you say, "Boy, I had no idea they did that." I just saw somebody, I can't remember if it was Joe Buck or somebody, and he said, I don't really watch the monitor at all during the game, except when the ball is about to fly out of the park and I need to see it. And I kind of thought, that's how they usually know doing minor league baseball and doing college baseball. That's one of the biggest challenges. Is you're looking at, it's the seventh inning, it's 9:00 at night. You're like, hold on, did that thing get out of here or not?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they look at the monitor and see it. So there's those tiny things. Does it get easier as you get onto the bigger stage?
I would say, that's a good question. I would say it changes, right? Like I remember in the beginning, the first couple of years, I don't think they could have taken the monitor out of the booth and I would have never known. Like I never looked at the monitor, and now I look at the monitor 90% of the game. Now, of course, I'm the analyst, not the play-by-play person. Right. So that's it's different. I think for you play-by-play guys, you have to have more of both than you do as an analyst, but. Now I find myself monitor and then glance at whereas in the beginning, like I said, it was field and maybe look at the monitor for a replay. So, I mean, I just think you get more confident, more comfortable. You end up in different roles, like I've gotten to do studio. That's completely unique. Getting to do dugout stuff is really unique. But, I think the most important thing, at least in my mind, is not to lose. Like, I really don't want to be a professional broadcaster. Like, I'm just a person that loves college baseball, and I love the player-coach interactions, and I love the sport, and I just want to share, like, if there was a great college baseball game on, I would want to sit on my couch with some buddies and talk and watch, talk through the game, watch the game. And that's really what I'm trying to do on television, just maybe with less profanity and a little bit more professionally.
Well, we had Boog Shambi on here, a friend of yours, and we were just talking about this. One of the things that he said about broadcasting was that something that maybe worries him is that you have kids who are 22 years old starting, it's 2020, and they kind of start to sound a little bit too much like they're imitating the people of the past, and maybe they're trying to be that Vin Scully kind of voice or that Mel Allen kind of voice. Do you think there's kind of a stiffness to baseball broadcasting, maybe that's set in a little bit?
That's a good question. I mean, Man, it's a hard. I would say this, like, I see a lot of younger play-by-play guys where they haven't found their voice yet, and I think it's unfair for me to expect that they would have found it already. And you're watching them kind of struggle to find it, and a lot of times they're just not being the best version of themselves. So I think it's easy to be critical of that, but I think it's also, that's a real struggle to try and find your voice. And we listen to the Boogs of the world, and I grew up with Harry Callis, and we think about Vin Scully, and those guys are just unicorns. And so it's I think the biggest thing is you do have to find that version of it has to be really authentic you, or people can sniff that out. But at the same time, you have to develop the skills of the profession too. I think that's a work in progress for all of us.
You ever say anything that just embarrassed the shit out of you?
Oh, on a broadcast? Gosh, I know I have. I think I immediately black out after I do those things for my own self-preservation. Man, what's the worst? I mean, this is one, it's in a fun way. Like, I get to do the Bases Loaded every year with Matt Schick, which is a blast. Yeah. And so we're constantly, the producer's constantly bringing you to games. And so something, you're about to see something eventful happen. So we start guessing and stuff like that. And I called a Spencer Torkelson home run last year, and I got really cocky. And so we went to 2 games in a split screen, and I said, gap shot, and both hitters punched out like awful punch outs. And so, yeah, you make some predictions that don't go great. That's for sure.
Well, I told the one with Boog, which I'm sure you listened to, Mike, but it was it was a little dribbler down the third base line, and the throw caught the guy at first base. And I wanted to say he was almost safe. He almost beat it out. It almost pulled the first baseman out the bag. And instead I said something like, here comes the throw, and oh no, it looks like it beat him off. And I was like, that wasn't what I wanted to say there. But I've had so many, for me, those one-liners. I think kind of what makes that video popular that we were talking about is that I wanted to lean into the dis-ease of sort of the society that we're living in, where people are scared that they're going to say something, and then it goes viral on Twitter, and it's a slip of the tongue or something like that. And so it's sort of this intentional kind of like, what if I could say some of these things that are a little bit offbeat or even embarrassing? But it took a while to get to that. I will say one of the things that was, well, here you go. You ever shit yourself on the air? I've done that a couple of times. You ever been?
Oh, wow. I've never had the pleasure of that. No.
Oh, I keep a JanSport backpack under the boot, under the table, not to change it, but in the private bathroom. Hopefully they have after that. This is Mike Rooney talking about shitting his pants. No, shitting my pants here on the LCRR podcast, available on every podcast platform you have out there. Mike, do you do a podcast yourself? I know you do a radio show.
Yeah, so we have that Sirius XM show. I started doing these Instagram lives during the pandemic. Just I've never been an Instagram guy. It's been fun to try out. So that's been fun, but I've been on a lot of podcasts, but I've never done one. It's quite a commitment, as you know. It's like it is. Even the Instagram live thing is a commitment, and there's no editing.
Yeah, it's hard. It's I've been kind of struggling. I did one with Boog, and I did one with Ellery Smith, who's a writer on Robot Chicken, and now you're my third guest. And I took a little break. I took about a 10-day break, and I just was sort of trying to figure out what is it I want to do. And I think it kind of grows as you go. The podcast, everybody's got one right now. And people, it kind of took me like years when some of those videos went viral. They're like, oh, you must have a podcast. I'd love to listen to that. Mm-hmm. Well, no, actually, I don't. This is pretty much it right here. But for me, I love to just go to the live game and just do the play-by-play. I'm not as big, and I don't listen to a lot of sports radio or anything like that. Do you ever worry maybe in the business of broadcasting that we've become too much kind of opinionation machine oriented, where we're just flapping gums and talking about games theoretically rather than just enjoying the live game?
Yeah, I'm not attracted to that sports debate craze. I've never been a fan of that. Like I'm with you. Like I'm a baseball guy clearly, but I love all sports. And I think there's nothing like a radio call of a baseball game. Like, and clearly if you want to make a living in broadcasting, television is an infinitely better living than radio. But man, calling 2009, I got to work with Tim Healy calling the radio, the ASU baseball games. And man, radio is a blast. It's just everything about it. And so that's, and I always say this, I love sports talk radio from Philadelphia because it reminds me of home. I've been gone for 20 years. Like, I love the irrational nature of Philadelphia sports radio. I love the craziness. It makes me homesick in a good way. But I'm more like that's my favorite thing about broadcasting is if the game starts at 5 and I need to be there at 3, all day I'm thinking of ways to convince my wife so I can go to the game at 2. Whereas, like normal course of work, if you have to be there at 3, you're like screaming in the parking lot at 2:59.
Right. You just have to drag yourself in, and there's so much. God, there's such an energy. I go to the stadium and just will sit there and just find any excuse to be in there before the games. And gosh, I'm missing that feeling so much right now. Would you ever think about doing something like a video game announcing, something like that?
I mean, that's a good question. I never gave it some thought, but I mean, like, think about some of the sports movies where I mean, when you said that, my first vision of my brain wasn't Vern Lundquist in Happy Gilmore?
He was.
Yeah. Like, so those announcers make
Doesn't he
those
say so? Happy Gilmore? Who the fuck is Happy Gilmore?
Gosh, Vern Lundquist really did cuss in that movie, didn't he?
So he said something to that effect.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So anyway, I never thought about it for me, but gosh, like it adds a level of authenticity when you see stuff like that.
Oh, I love it. And I think that that's something that I kind of think about baseball announcing in sort of that postmodern phase, because we've had real sports announcers play fictional versions of themselves. Bob Uecker in Major League, obviously he had a different name, but Vern Lundquist and Brent Musburger, I think, was in Waterboy with Adam Sandler.
Oh gosh, he was so good. Dan Fouts, yeah, that's right. Bob Uecker in Major League. How could I whiff on that one? Oh,
well, so Brockmeyer, things like that. It's just now we're
in the business for nothing.
Hey, baby. That's right. Favorite quote for that would be that. Is there a favorite quote for Major League?
Is that? Oh gosh, that's one of them. Too far. That's a good one too. No, too high. That's
too high. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too high. What does that mean?
I need to rewatch that movie in the pandemic. That is a classic. Oh,
I think about that all the time when he said, "Oh, you can't say goddamn on the radio." Oh, who cares? Nobody's listening anyway. I thought about that. So well, when I was with the Air Hogs, the Chinese national team, for the first time, I had been there 2 years, and that was the first year we kind of got like a nice video stream. And they said, well, actually, here you go. Here's a name drop for you. Billy Martin Jr., son of Billy Martin, is the operating executive of that team. And so he got some money to do it. And he said, well, I think they're going to be watching in China. And I said, okay, great. Let's make this look good. I'll do my best to sound good here, Billy. And we did it all through a portal called American Association Baseball.tv. About a month and a half into the season, I asked our translator, really nice young woman named Xingping Liu, and I said, Xingping, are they out there? Are they listening tonight in Shanghai and Beijing and Chengdu and Inner Mongolia? And she looked at me and she just goes, no, it can't get through the government censors. And I just went down. I went down on a knee. And I was just laughing about as hard as I've laughed in my life. Just, oh, you have a crazy laugh. I was like, yes, I do. But it was truly kind of that, it was truly kind of the fulfillment of that quote from that movie. Because, then I said, well, who cares? Nobody's out there listening anyway. Later, we found out that there were people who were listening.
Right.
You can still access stuff over there. It was a very, very committed audience. And,
that's awesome.
I guess, in what is it? And at the core of every joke is a little bit of truth. And that's, I think, why that movie kind of resonates with us. Do you believe that sports announcing is funny enough today?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's I prefer that style. Like I always love a good laugh. That we talked about Boog. Like I love Boog's sarcastic sense of humor. It's really dry. I appreciate that. I think it's one thing I've learned over the years is that you do have to be very self-aware. I tend to like that, and some play-by-play guys or think about Tom Hart, who I get to work with, has a great sense of humor. But you and your partner have to have the discipline to really. There's a time to yuck it up, and there's a time that the game has to be the most important thing. And so, but that's my preference. I always want to laugh and enjoy the game, and that's part of the fun of sports is the ability, the camaraderie, and the humor.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but if they hadn't canceled the season, who do you think would have ultimately proven triumphant in Omaha?
Ooh,
Too early to tell?
Well, I mean, we got to remember it's a tournament at the end, so it's like it's not always the best team. But the team that I had picked to win it all was UCLA, and they were probably up to like 5th in most polls. So I was really intrigued by that team. But it's you got to win the tournament at the end, which is fairly tricky. But I think that was one of the reasons this was a fun year, is because there wasn't like one team. Like Florida was ranked number 1, but they had 3 freshmen in really prominent roles. I think we had a lot left to learn this year, which was going to be really. I thought the postseason was going to be fairly electric because there wasn't 1 or 2 or 3 teams that were head and shoulders above everybody else.
What's your favorite CWS ever?
The one that always comes to mind for me is 2009. I was there with ASU. There was 34 big leaguers there. And I mean, you're talking about prominent big leaguers like DJ LeMahieu, Brandon Belt, Matt Harvey, Mike Leake, Jason Kipnis, Cole Calhoun, Brian Dozier was there with Southern Miss. I mean, it was really Dallas Keuchel. It was Drew Smiley, Brett McCann, or James McCann, the catcher. It was amazing. 2005 is a really neat one for me because I just left Arizona State as a coach, and they were there and they played Nebraska. You can imagine the stadium was completely red. Jeff Larish hit 3 home runs that day. I mean, there's not an Omaha I haven't loved, but those are 2 that kind of come front center there.
How about 14 Vanderbilt, Virginia? You remember that one?
Oh yeah, heck yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you recognize this right here?
What do you got?
That's the leg that was behind home plate. I was a 5th row for the championship game. They had my leg on ESPN the whole night. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I was with a collegiate summer team at Derby, Kansas, Derby Twins, Jayhawk Collegiate League, and
Jayhawk League.
Our coach is his friend's dad got tickets. He said, "Well, if you guys can get up here, it's like 1:00 in the afternoon." We drove from Wichita to Omaha. Got there like midway through the first inning. Well, they were in the 5th row, and it was like we streaked there. It was our last day of our All-Star break. I woke up on a golf course about 5:30 a.m. the next day. It was a heck of a time. I had no idea. I was so far down the river of this collegiate league, and it's like running over it was my first thing I'd ever done. So I was like, I got to know every stat. I got to know every player, and I didn't even really pay attention to the regionals, the super regionals, the CWS, all that stuff. And, I knew it was Virginia and Vanderbilt, and people kept, talking about the teams. I was like, oh yeah, I agree with that 100%. I had no idea what anybody was talking about.
Have you ever done the NBC tournament? Do you ever get to do that?
Oh yeah, baby. Absolutely. We were there. And I think they take the top 4 teams from the Jayhawk League get an automatic bid. And so we made it to the end of the first week. We were, I think, the last team eliminated at the end of the first week. And it was, that was a lot of fun there at historic Lawrence Dumont Stadium, which unfortunately now is no more. Did you?
Are they doing a new? I've never been. We would send players there occasionally. Like if we had players, when I was at ASU, if we had players that did summer school, we tried to send a couple players there. But I coached in Alaska one summer, and that was a big deal. If you won the Alaska League, you go to Wichita, and that's one of my regrets. I've not been to that tournament yet, and it's not what it are they building a new AA stadium in Wichita, or what is the
Yeah,
situation?
it's kind of changed up. So they had historic Lawrence Dumont Stadium, which was built in the 30s, and they hosted the NBC World Series for all those years. And they did the Wichita Wranglers up until about 2011 or something like that when they left. And an independent team called the Wichita Wingnuts was there. And they would take a trip for like 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
when the NBC came, and I guess late July, early August. And they just finished that. They just closed the stadium, I think, in 2018 and demolished it right after the season. So they built a new stadium. It's huge, 40 million some odd dollar stadium for the Wichita Wind Surge, which I think is AAA there. But I don't, it got to be a little bit different. That year that I was there was 2014. And as I recall, it was all college kids. And then the next year, maybe a year or two after that, it was like Roger Clemens.
Yeah, there's a team that's
Chipper Jones, all these guys out there, and they're just like the ringers. And I guess you can just enter the tournament. I think Toby Keith was involved in it in some way.
Yeah, I think he's a baseball fan, and there's always been that element. I remember Paul Stevens was the coach of Northwestern for a long, long time. He played in the NBC tournament for years while he was still coaching at Northwestern. He was in really good shape, and I always kind of liked that part of it, that it was mostly college kids, but then you'd get some adults sprinkled in there that were really good players. And so I hope that tournament survives, although it definitely feels like summer baseball is in a very interesting place right now.
Yeah, it's tough. I know a lot of them have, so I guess the Cape Cod has shut down. I know the Coastal Plains League has postponed to July 1st, and I really do hope so. You talk about that innocent. It's almost even more innocent than the institutional seasons. It's just kids out there, and it would be a shame if we lost it. But can you imagine that you play the whole season, not to dump on the Jayhawk Collegiate League, but then all of a sudden it's Roger Clemens out there on the mound. You're like, well, hold on a second, something went wrong here.
That's right.
Did you, as a player, ever play in any of those leagues?
No, when I was playing, so Craig Counsell was my teammate when I was at Notre Dame. And so he was our best player, one of our best players. So he did go play that circuit. Like, he played in the Jayhawk League, I think, for 2 summers, played in Alaska, I think, 1 summer. I never got to, I would always just go home. I was a walk-on. I would go home to Philadelphia. I would work and just play in our adult league back there. It's called the Westchester Adult League. But really what I got to experience summer leagues was in my coaching career, just going out to Alaska and Fairbanks that 1 summer. And then, that was one of my roles at ASU, was they call it summer placement, placing the players in summer leagues. So.
And Craig, you guys played together. Did he always have the, hands up like this?
Higher hands, but not like crazy high hands. No, that was developed during the course of his pro career.
Huh. Well, I've always wondered what would be the impetus. Break it down for us a little bit. Why would somebody put their hands all the way up there? Is there some secret?
I think those pro players, they have had, not to speak for Craig, but I remember speaking to him and he just said, hey, it's just something that I was trying to create a mental trigger. And so it was something I think you see a lot of professional players. You think about those guys, they've had so many thousands of at-bats and so many swings. And really what they're doing is their gyrations before the pitch have as much to do with their brain as their bodies. They're just trying to get themselves, it's a feel, they're trying to get the right feel to get themselves in the right frame of mind and physical position to hit. So it was really that, he had won a World Series ring with the Marlins. He had been released. And when he was back with the Diamondbacks, he had already been released by 2 organizations, I think. So, I think at that point, it's really more mental than it is physical.
What advice do you give to kids here during this uncertain time, just about staying ready and staying positive?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's funny. So in my day job, I'm a sales trainer. So it's very similar, like you're coaching salespeople instead of baseball players. But one of my favorite all-time movies is Cinderella Man. And I think, and I use this analogy. Oh, so good, that movie. So, but think about this, like Jim Braddock doesn't win. He never becomes world heavyweight champion if there's not a Great Depression. And there were 2 things that happened to him during the Great Depression. He's working on the dock, and he develops his left hand, which was a weakness, and his right hand, which kept breaking on him, heals. If those two things don't happen, he doesn't become world heavyweight champion either. But the reason those things happened was because he stayed after it. Like his work ethic was off the charts. So I think that's the hardest thing is right now, it's so easy to get in a mental rut and get lethargic. But if you do that, I think the positives that can come out of this, different skills that we come up with, whatever it may be, I think you kind of forfeit those if you're not diligent in just fighting the good fight, even though I get it. Like we all feel like we're paddling 1,000,000 miles an hour and sinking anyway. It's hard.
And speaking of positives, just came out this past week that they're only going to do 5 rounds in the MLB draft. What kind of positives could you take out of that for the college game? I know it's tough on those players, but what would be some of the ripple effects that might be positive down the line for the college side?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tougher on players for sure. I think the ultimate positive, because it's this year, it's more pandemic related, but going forward, the draft's never going to be the same again. I would be shocked if you see anything more than a 20-round draft going forward. Now, the truth is that's probably in the range of what it should be. It felt like it was a little bloated, but I think it's only a net positive if at the end of this, there's a resource reallocation to minor league players. It does seem weird to me that like a 19th round pick would get 125,000, and then like a legit minor leaguer is in AA making $8,000 for the year. Like that doesn't feel right to me. So if they can pay minor leaguers a real wage, I think that's a win. Now, you asked about the college game. I mean, the talent level in the college game is going to improve exponentially. And I think Rob Manfred has probably looked at college baseball and said, hey, we have a really good minor league system right here. And it's not only are these kids getting good at baseball, improving their game, but they're getting an education, which is good for the game too. So, I think the short term is going to be very difficult for a lot of baseball families. And I have a heart for that. But at the same time, that just as the college baseball fan in me, yeah, there's a lot of players that are going to be staying in college and coming to college. It'll make the products, better.
And I think the biggest immediate winner, you mentioned you've worked in it. I've worked in it for 3 years myself. The junior college ranks, I think they'll benefit quite a bit here from some of those players matriculating into the NJCAA in the immediate future. Refresh my memory. What junior college did you manage at?
Phoenix College. And
Phoenix College.
FK, as it was called. So there was Phoenix College is in the city of Phoenix, and so like the kids in Scottsdale would say, "Oh yeah, I heard you're coaching at FK," and I'm like, "FK, what are you talking about?" And they would tease me and say, "Oh yeah, the kids that are going there are so dumb they think the initials are FK," and so that was untrue. But
what do you think that side of the collegiate game does for a player?
Like if you look at 2016, 17, and 18. We've been averaging about 140 high school players signing a professional contract per year. I am 100% in favor of families having that choice. But if you told me there's 140 high school players that are ready for the rigors of the minor leagues every year, I would say there's no shot in Hades that that's true. Now, if you told me like there's 40 or 50 kids that are truly ready for that, I'm for it. And I want families to have that choice. I think it's great for the sport. But I've to getting to your question, Joy, I've always thought that even a high school player going and spending 1 or 2 years in junior college would be infinitely more ready for minor league baseball than just going high school to the minor leagues. I think going from high school to the minor leagues, unless you're a Mike Trout or some, like freak show athlete like that. I mean, even Bryce Harper went to junior college for a year, so I've always struggled with the high school players signing right away. I want them to have that choice. I just think 140 per year is too many. In my opinion.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I think the junior college experiment or experience is really just invaluable as players. As you said, Bryce Harper. Now, he was a little bit different. I think he was about 16 years old there at Southern Nevada.
Yeah, did his GED early. Yep. Yeah.
Well, some of us can do that. Okay.
Yeah.
And it really is it's kind of a special experience, kind of the pure nature of the game. I talked to even players in the 4-year colleges, NCAA, and they kind of they look back at the junior college years with a little wistfulness that only a 21-year-old kid can have. But, there's something even more sort of pure about it. And
Yeah.
oh, I loved it. I worked at Kahoma Community College in Mississippi, MAC-JC, for 3 years. And I still look back on that as probably the 3 funnest years I ever had in my life.
Yeah.
It was just an absolute blast. This has been an absolute blast, Mike. I really appreciate your time, and any advice you have for me. You're out there, monitoring my work as a hawk or a friendly. The hawk sounds a little bit vicious there. Friendly dove out there, monitoring my work. What advice do you have for me going forward here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't know what your goals and aspirations are, but I would say just for me, I've clearly you've seen it on Twitter. I've thoroughly enjoyed your work. So clearly what you desire is the most important thing, whatever you aspire to have happen. But I would just tell you from a consumer standpoint, as someone that loves baseball and college baseball, I think it's anytime I see a new clip of yours, I'm excited. I can't wait to hear what the new line is. Yeah. I've had a blast. And so I hope you continue to do those things because it's been really fun.
Well, will you push it to your colleagues? Will you say, who is this guy? Will you throw it out there a little bit to them?
Yeah, I mean, you see me on Twitter. I'm your agent on Twitter, basically.
God, I appreciate that. You have no idea
it's
how
awesome.
much I appreciate that. Oh, it really is. I've loved getting to know you here on this podcast and following you. Here's the secret about me. I follow a lot of people on Twitter. I mute a lot of people on Twitter. I follow them, and then I'm just like, I don't want anything to do with you. This is an empty follow here. You're one of the few. You're on a list of about 12 people that I don't mute pretty much immediately. So you're in rarefied air here, Mike. And
hang with it. Maybe we'll see how long I last. I like it.
Yeah, well, it's been great. You stay safe out there in Prescott, Arizona, and I might actually see you. I did the National Junior College Men's Soccer Tournament this year in Tyler, Texas.
Cool.
And right at the end of it, they said, get on back here next year. Except next year is going to be in Prescott, Arizona. And so I said,
Yavapai.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a Yavapai. I think they just alternate just 4 or 5.
Yeah, Yavapai's got a great soccer program. That would make sense.
So if I'm in Prescott, I'm gonna give you a buzz. I'll reach you on the Zoom. Yeah, I'll call you on the Zoom meeting again, so don't lose this link. I'm about to go into the Zoom meeting. I'm going to extend this for 13 months just to be safe.
Thank you.
Mike Rooney on the LCR podcast. Mike, be good. Thanks a lot.
You too, Joey. Pleasure. Thanks, man.